got to tell you, when I first moved out here to New York, I'm from Pittsburgh, and people warned me. They're like, listen, New Yorkers, they're kind of mean, all right? And I got to say, I found out two things. One, you guys are some of the nicest people I have ever met. And the people who told me that just walk slow, okay? So I am so grateful to be here. And as Pastor Jeremy said, I'm from Pittsburgh, which means, if you're guessing it, I am a diehard Steelers fan, except for today. I'm a Bills fan, okay? Listen, I'm sorry if you're a Chiefs fan, but today I really want the Bills to take this, all right? But I honestly have no room to be talking about anything with sports or athletics. If you can resonate with me on this, I am the most athletically challenged person you've ever met in your life. I know I might not look it, but genuinely, I'm the worst, and I can prove it. Because when I was in college, I was pretty much known as that guy who stayed in the library. Like, people wouldn't remember me as that kid on campus that carried big stacks of books from the library to my dorm. So I still remember this very vividly. On campus, this guy approached me. He's like, hey, I want you to join our intramural volleyball team. And I fought with him so hard. I was like, man, I am the worst at this. I promise you, I'm just terrible. And he somehow convinced me to do it. So I still remember the day showing up to our gym. I didn't even know where the entrance was. I had to walk around that building 3 times, finally found the door, and when I went in, game's just about to start, they give me a 30-second tutorial on, here's how you play volleyball. You're going to hold your hands in some weird spot and break your wrist, and it's going to be really fun. So I was like, all right. So I stood in my spot. The other team served the ball, and we all watched as the ball just went right over the net, whizzed right past me, and hit the ground. And I was in shock. I was like, what just happened? And then it happened again. They served the ball, comes over right past me, hits the ground. At this point, the other team knows exactly how they're going to win. Just serve the ball to me. And I'm feeling like I'm letting my team down. I'm getting those passive-aggressive looks. I'm like, okay, I got to try here. So this time, ball comes over the net. My instincts just kick in. I didn't say they were good instincts. They were just instincts. And for whatever reason, I got the sports mixed up. So I put my hands together like I'm holding a baseball bat, okay? And I swing at the ball and somehow make contact. And the whole room just went silent as we watched as that ball just soared into the ceiling and shattered a light, okay? I'm telling you, I'm the worst. So I did the most honorable thing I could do. I ejected myself from the game and just sat down on the bench. And from that point on, I just knew anytime I'm playing a sport, I'm just going to stay on the bench. But it got a little bit worse than that because the next week I saw our team captain and I was so excited. I was like, hey, man, I know I broke a light, but listen, I've been watching some videos. I think I can do well with this. Like, when's our next game? And he started getting all shady. He's looking at the ground. And I'm like, when's our next game? And he's like, it was last night. And I was like, oh, no, nobody told me. He's like, yeah, that's right. And I was like, okay, well, how'd we do? He's like, we won. I was like, okay. So my career in volleyball ended at that moment. And anytime anybody would ask me, hey, would you play this sport? I would always say, no, but I'll sit down and watch. I'm gonna stay on the bench when I do that. Because in honor of our series, I had made a decision in advance that when it came to sports, I was going to sit down on the bench. That was the best place for me to stay. And I love what we're talking about this whole month. We're talking about decisions. We're talking about the things that we should be thinking about in advance. Because I don't know about you, but I've seen too many people and I'm just like, man, did you even think about that decision? Did you think about that when you woke up and you put that on? Did you check in with anybody about that? Did you ask any, why did you say that? What have you ever just asked yourself, why did they do that? I think whenever we get in a community like this and we start to think about our decisions in advance, we don't just make good decisions. When we're in a community and we're trying to be more like Jesus and we're focused like him, we make the best decisions possible. I am fully convinced of this. And I know at times it can be hard because whenever we're thinking ahead in the future, it can be a little bit disappointing. If you're like me, you're like, I don't know if I even want to think about the future because I don't have that much control over it. I know that you might not be able to look ahead at this year and say, I know exactly what's going to happen, but I can assure you of this, you are going to make a decision this year. You're going to make a lot of decisions, and I think it's important that we take time to think about that. So we're obviously building towards a decision that we're going to focus on. This entire month, we've been focusing on a number of different decisions that are important. And when Pastor Jeremy and I sat down and talked about what type of decision should we focus on for today? There were a few that we had talked about, but there was one that just stuck out to me that I thought was so important that we talk about. And that decision is this, is that I will live a life on purpose. I will live a life on purpose. And a statement and a decision like this is based upon a belief and an understanding that we do indeed have a purpose. I know that some of us in here might be in some different spots. You might be in here and you're like, hey, I don't even know where I'm at in my relationship with Jesus. I don't know if I want this. Well, there's others in here who you're saying, I have this dream from God and I'm wrestling with it. Wherever you're at, I just want to ask you, can I have your permission just for a second to encourage you? Because what I know to be true is this, is that first and foremost, God created you from your very beginning. I know that you do have a purpose if you're in here. If you're breathing, you have a purpose. Ephesians 2:10 tells us this, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do good things that he planned for us long ago. Before you were born, God was thinking about you. When he was creating the universe, you were on his mind. And I know whenever we read this verse, we hear good. And for a lot of us, that's a weak word. That's not a word that we typically use when we're describing something that's incredible. It's like, it's good. But when God makes something good, I need you to understand this. It's not weak. When God makes something good, it is sustained, multiplying, producing, excellent, strong, whole, without blemish, able to persevere. And most importantly, it points people to Jesus. You were made so well. But if you're like me, I at times can be like, all right, cool, like I'm made good, but I don't even know how I feel about God's methods sometimes because this guy's got some crazy plans. I love even just this verse written in Jeremiah 29:11 to a group of people who were also questioning their future at this time, in which it said this, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. He knows the plans he has for you. He didn't just come up with an assignment and a purpose for you and say, hey, go figure it out. He's with you in this journey of life, and he is present right now with you. He's so intentional with you. But you might even be asking more of this. Okay, so what does having a purpose mean? It means a few things that I just want to build you up with for a second, because it means that you have some unique skills. God is infinitely creative. We're still trying to figure out what he created with this planet Earth. But here's what I know is that when I'm able to look at you, I can see that there's something unique about you. There's unique skills that God's given us to be able to sing, to lead, to do things that, quite frankly, I don't have. Some of you are good at math. I'm terrible at math, okay? That's a skill that God has given some of you. You are literally dripping with purpose. It's not just your skills, though. The fact of where you're at in life. There's unique circles that only you can influence. You might look at it and be like, this job that I'm in feels like it's just a punishment from God, when actually there's purpose behind it. There's a reason you're there. There's a reason you have that friend group. There's a reason you're part of the family that you're a part of, because there's specific people that only you can reach, that only you're going to be able to influence. And it means this, that if I have a purpose, I have a unique assignment from Jesus. I know we can respond to this with a lot of like, yeah, but it's just some ordinary thing. It's just a job. No, it's a mission field. There's people who might never find themselves in this building, but they're going to find themselves interacting with you. You might think like, oh, it's just that coworker, or it's just that customer that just has been given a superpower from the devil to annoy me. No, that's somebody that Jesus died for. That's somebody that he's putting in your life so that you can be able to influence them for something more. It's not just raising a child if you're a parent in here. It's shaping the future to look more and more like Jesus. You have a purpose. I hope you're catching this, because my fear is that while we can recognize and we can say, yeah, I have a purpose, my fear is that our decisions don't back up that belief. My fear is that we would say that, like, yeah, I have a purpose, but then as we go throughout this year, we'd make decisions that don't align with that. And my fear is that some of you have treated your purpose like I treated my sports team. Like the best thing I can do is just sit on the bench. Let me tell you what the bench looks like for a second. Sorry, I thought I lost that. All right, here's what the bench looks like for a second. It's like when you show up to work late. It's whenever you get there and you're like, I'm just going to give the bare minimum. I mean, AI is great. Let me see if it can do my job for me. I'm just going to see if I can take a step back now. Okay, it's like whenever you are about to leave the house and you do that last check at the mirror and you're like, I just don't even want to do this. I just can't wait till I get home. And I'm not talking about, avoid rest, because rest is great. Rest will actually allow you to see more of purpose. Being on the bench is whenever you start saying things to yourself like, I just can't wait to get home and I'll take care of it tomorrow. I'll do it. I'll text them back later. I'm going to sort the mail. I'll take care of that. Let me just watch one more episode. Yeah, I'm going to take care of the budget stuff tomorrow. It's not that big of a deal. We start to just delay, and sitting on the bench puts us in some very weird spots. It puts us in confusing places where we just forget at the end of the day that we even have a purpose. And whenever we are in this spot, what happens is when it comes to our life, we find ourselves in this place where we are just watching things happen, but we don't even feel worthy to participate. And I'm not here to judge you. I have been a professional bench sitter in so many parts of my life. I have, in so many ways, sat down and said, I don't know if that's going to be for me. And you might have some valid reasons. You might not feel necessary. You might feel as if there's so many other qualified people out there. Come on, why can't somebody else do it? I don't really have to do it, right? You also might not feel like you're enough. Whenever we're talking about purpose, it feels like this big, scary thing of, okay, if I'm going to step out into something that's uncomfortable, people are going to look at me. They're going to see something. I'm going to feel unsafe. I'm going to feel exposed. You might also just feel ashamed, though. You might feel like, you know what? I have done some things. In the past, God would have wanted to use me. In the past, my life held purpose, but because of what I did the other night, because of what I did with that person last week, why on earth would God want to use me? Why on earth would I be able to live a life of purpose? Instead of choosing purpose, we choose a comfortable place that doesn't require anything of us. It doesn't take us anywhere uncomfortable. It doesn't challenge us to step out. And it welcomes people to just come sit with us. It's the bench. And while it seems safe, living on the bench is just a confusing place. And I'm just talking from my experience on this, because what I don't want you to think is that I'm telling you, just do some more things and you'll feel like you have purpose. I believe on the inside of us, there's something that just knows that we're designed for more. It's not just, hey, do more things. But what happens is when we avoid our purpose, it causes us to look at ourselves in some strange ways. And my hope for you is that at the end of this year, you're able to look back and see that you lived the fullest version of your life in God's purpose. Because right now in this moment, all I'm trying to do is echo God's voice to you. Because he's speaking to you right now saying, hey, I've got you. I'm with you. Let's get up together and step forward. Here's the main idea I just want you to keep with you today of this message. I can't live a life on purpose if I stay on the bench. I can't live a life on purpose if I'm going to stay on the bench. And I find it helpful whenever we're talking about things like this to look at scenarios in the Bible that exist with this, to see stories that are of people that encountered the same issue. And so what we're going to look today is at a story in Judges chapter 6. So if you want to find that, I'm going to give you a moment to get there, but I want to give you the context on this because Judges is like any other book in the Bible, okay? What we see at the beginning is we see this leader that they had and this great organization of how things were structured, and then by the end of the book, things have completely gone into complete anarchy, okay? It's, of all books, I would describe this as the Wild West of the Bible. And what happens is God keeps assigning and keeps appointing judges, not judges how we would look at them today. They, quite frankly, just functioned as sheriffs, okay? They would keep God's people safe. They would keep them on track. And most importantly, they would keep them in relationship with him. Because throughout the book, we see God's people just keep getting in this pattern of, well, I don't want a relationship with God. I don't want to follow him. And that's where we pick up in Judges chapter 6. At the very beginning of this chapter, we see God's people no longer want to follow God. They want nothing to do with him. And what happens is they are being terrorized by this group of people called the Midianites. So much so that they are now living in caves. And that's where we pick up on this. Because what's interesting is they're crying out to God. They're saying, God, would you please rescue us? And what God does is he works through a person to answer their prayer. Before we even read through this, can I just ask you, could it be possible that by you saying yes to your purpose, it's actually an answer to prayer to a group of people? Just let that sit with you. We're going to read through Judges 6:11 through 16. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah. I originally would always pronounce this as Oprah, so you guys are ahead of me now. Which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where were all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. And then the Lord turned to him and said, go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you. But Lord, Gideon replied, how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family. The Lord said to him, I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. What we just read was this interaction between God and Gideon. Gideon's afraid, and God is giving him the boldness to step out and do something. And if you continue reading this, you'll see some of the most amazing moments in the Bible where we see God doing things that only he can do, and the final result being 40 years of peace for this group of people that previously lived in caves. So here's what I believe, even just as we've read this. Believe that today is a special day for you. That interaction that we just saw between God and Gideon is an interaction that God wants to have with you today. One where he is speaking to you about your purpose and encouraging you. Now is the moment to step up. And what I want to do is look back through this passage again and not just make a decision that's based off of our emotions, because I can be so easily swayed to say, I'm just going to go do this. What I want to do is look back at that passage and look at some of the truth that exists. Truth that what I'm labeling it as is truth that can keep me off the bench. Because what I want to do is help you make a decision for this year, a decision that you can make every day. And whenever things happen that you might want to take a step back, sit back on the bench, you can say, I know exactly why I'm standing up, and I know exactly that I can move forward. So the first point that I want to give you is this, is that God sees my identity and potential when I'm afraid. God sees my identity and potential when I'm afraid. Those first two verses in Judges 11 through 12, it says, the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the tree Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. God sitting there, and Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress. Let me kind of explain what's happening here in this scene, because these people were afraid. And a winepress, if you're not familiar with this scene, I really wasn't either until I was able to find the pictures of it, but it was essentially two big hot tub vats. You'd have one that was up high and one that was low, and the high one would often drain down to the lower one. And we have Gideon who's threshing wheat in the lower one. So essentially what's happening is he's messing up everybody's wine for the next year, okay? Because as these grapes get crushed, the liquid comes down, and that's where he's getting in all these grain and all this issue and all this stuff that's in there, because he's afraid. And when we're afraid, oftentimes we're doing necessary things in abnormal places. But, I mean, can you blame him? Everybody else was doing it. Everybody else was afraid. Nobody was doing things that they needed to do in the right places. They were scared. Have you been where Gideon's been at before? Where you want to be that person. You want to be the parent in your household that can do this, but you're just afraid, like, can I even connect with my kids? You want to be that person at your job, but you're like, I feel like I've seen the weird Christians online, and I don't want to be that person. Like, how do I do this? I've been like that so many times in my life. I'll replay the things that people have said to me, the words where I'm like, can I do it? I'm nervous, and I'm afraid, and sometimes they're valid things that we say, but I'm so thankful that when I've got no response to the valid fears in front of me, I've got a God who sees farther than my fears and sees into the future. We serve a God who looks at us and says, mighty hero. He looks at you and he says that. But if you're critical like me, you might be like, no, that's what he said to Gideon. Come on, don't be like that. What does he actually say to me? You're right, okay? When we look at the Bible, it's split up into two parts. We have the Old Testament and the New Testament, the way things used to be with our relationship with God, the Old Testament, and now the way our relationship is with God now. And in the New Testament, we know that we have Jesus who came to this earth, died on a cross, came back to life with all authority, and broke down every limitation. Gideon was called mighty hero. Romans 8:37 says this to us, though, and I love this truth. But in all these things, we overwhelmingly conquer through him who loves us. If you read through this passage in Romans, Paul's writing to people who are afraid. And what he's telling them is, Gideon, mighty hero, you are more than a conqueror. Here's what that means, is that when you show up to work and everybody's got a negative attitude, you're not able to just keep your attitude steady and stay positive. No, that'd be conquering level. More than a conqueror means I change everybody else's attitudes now. Okay? It means that while you might look and say, I've got these horrible things that have happened in my family, it's not just you stopping with it and saying, I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to allow my family's issues with anger or my family's issues with emotional management or my family's issues with managing money to be something that I continue on. It means I'm going to set the next generation up for success. That's what being more than a conqueror means. And that is what God sees when he looks at you. Whenever we look at this, I need you to understand, we're living in some great truth right now. We're living in something amazing, and that's what happens, is I can stay off the bench when I realize God sees so much more. God sees something better. Okay, so I realize that even when I'm afraid, God can see more than me. The second point is this, is that God gives me strength to step through disappointments. Verses 13 and 14, we see Gideon just giving it to God, just saying, hey, I'm mad about this, I'm mad about that, all these things, because Gideon grew up hearing the legacies of God and the amazing things that he did, about him splitting the Red Sea, about manna coming down from the sky, about water coming out of a rock, about fire, a pillar of fire leading people through the desert. And he's saying to God, you did it for everybody else, you're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for us. I'm disappointed because my people live in caves. And I want to validate this for a second. There's no positive spin on the cave. There's none of this like, but it was a really nice cave. You should have seen the interior of it. It was great. No, there's some things in life, disappointments, that are just valid. There's things that have happened in your life that I'm not going to try to spin and say, look at how there's things in life that are overwhelming, that are sad. And what I love, though, in verse 14 of this, though, is just this beginning part of, then the Lord turned to him and said. Just imagine for a second, you voiced all of your complaints to God, and you're in that moment where you see God's head just slowly turn to you. And notice, God doesn't fight him on it. God clearly has not abandoned them, but he's not content with where they're at. He's validating that to Gideon of, no, I also want you to step forward. But here's the interesting part about this. If you're curious on your purpose in life, I want you to think about your disappointments for a second. Often your disappointments are going to lead you in the direction of your purpose. Because you might look and you might say, I was in a family where everybody hated me, everybody put me down, I was so disappointed. Could it be that your purpose is to create environments and communities, relationships, even with one person, where they feel valid? Could it be that you look and you say, I remember this point in my life when everybody left me. I was completely alone. I was just by myself. Could it be that that disappointment is now going to serve as the direction of where you need to be at for other people? God didn't make us all the same. God didn't give us all the same pair of eyes. Don't neglect what he's allowing you to see. Because if he's allowing you to see it, most likely it's part of something that he wants you to do with your life. Our disappointments can be something that take us back, can make us think, I don't want to step forward, I'm done. But actually, it can help me stay off the bench when I remember that God gives me the strength to push through disappointments. The last point is this, is that God is present with me. I love in the last verse that we have here in verse 16, these 5 words that are said, I will be with you. This is God speaking, that I will be with you, okay? Because if you're like Gideon, And I believe in this moment, you might even have some bit of purpose that's stirring in you, something that you're saying, I know I need to do this, but how? How can I do it? Because I don't have people in my life that are pushing me to do it. I might not have this person or that person. Gideon's select group of people that were around him all lived in caves. This wasn't the all-star team that you would pick from to go and conquer and to go and bring 40 years of peace. What he had was a living God that was with him, who spoke those 5 words that change everything. I will be with you. That's what God's saying to you today. I will be with you in the purpose that is on your life. And can I tell you, this truth is incredible because what he illustrates here is a principle that when God is with me, the obstacles in front of me fail. When God is with me, when I get up off the bench and I'm with God, the obstacles that had so much strength just fall. These were people that would terrorize this group of people. And God says, I will reduce their strength. That's what happens in this beautiful and amazing moment here. So I just want to take a moment with you right now, because I don't know what this year is going to look like for you, but I plan on living on purpose. I plan on, whenever I'm in spots where I want to sit down on the bench, remembering the fact that God is with me whenever my identity is being questioned, whenever I'm questioning it myself and I'm feeling afraid, when I have been overwhelmed with disappointment, I'm going to remember that God is present with me. I don't know everything that this year is going to hold for you. There might be relationships that change. There might be job transitions. They might ban TikTok. I don't know what's going to happen this year, everybody. It's going to be an interesting year. But I want to check in for a moment. I want to just ask you this question. Right now, today, am I on the bench or am I living in purpose? Because you are going to choose. And let me just add, if you're in a spot where you're feeling motivated, but you're just not for sure what to do, there's actually a really great thing that's starting next week called Growth Track. And if you're curious because you're like, I just want to find out more about myself, I want to know more about this, I want to get surrounded with a group of people that can help me out, they're going to help you discover your place. They're going to help you move forward on discovering your purpose. Today, that might be a decision you need to make of, I am signing up for that. I will be here next week so that I can participate with that. But let me say this. Of anything that happens this year with your purpose, the most important thing, the thing that you were made for more than anything else, was to be in a relationship with Jesus. And that's not an ordinary thing. That's not something that's weak. That is one of the most beautiful things that we get to hold on to in life. And I understand you might be thinking about the things that I want to do, but if you're here and you've never made that choice, or you've been on the fence and you're like, I just don't even know where I'm at in my relationship with Jesus, if it's even clear or whatever, today, I want to give you that choice to choose Jesus. I want to give you that choice. Today has defined the relationship moment between you and Jesus. So I'm going to ask for a moment if we can just close our eyes. There's nothing spiritual that happens. This is just us being able to focus more, us being able to recognize that right now, Jesus is in the room, as present and as real as every other person here, and he's looking at you. And what I want to ask you is, if you've never made the decision before to follow Jesus, in a moment I'm going to ask you to just put your hand up in the air. That's not for me. That's not for anybody else. That's for you and Jesus to say, hey, Jesus, I'm putting my hand up right now. I want to get your attention. I want to follow you in this moment and forever. If that's a decision you need to make right now, I want you to put your hand up on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Come on. Nice and high. You're not just putting that for any person. You're putting that to say, Jesus, I need a relationship with you. And what we're going to do is we're just going to talk to God together. I want everybody in here, let's repeat this together. Say, Jesus, today, I'm making a decision to follow you. I believe that you came to this earth, you died on a cross, and you rose again. So right now, I'm making the choice to give you my life for this moment and forever. Amen.